All right. Good afternoon, folks. We are ready to start our noon programming. So all those who are out in the lobby, if they'd like to come in and join us, and please find their seats, we will get started. I'll turn the program over to the President and CEO of NCBA CLUSA, Doug O'Brien.
Good afternoon, everyone here in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club. Good morning or good evening to people in the United States and across the world and among our 700 or so virtual registrants. It's great to be with you again at midday for our keynote, which we're very excited about. Before we do, I want to bring up the person who's going to introduce our keynote. And Devin Furman is the Vice President of Sponsor Relations at Nationwide. Nationwide, many of you know, if you know the history of NCBA CLUSA, is a longtime pillar of the cooperative community and of NCBA CLUSA, the apex association here in the United States, for 105 years. And today, Devin brings that cooperative spirit straight from the farm in Iowa, where he was and his family were active members of cooperatives, and he was employed at an ag cooperative. And he brings it to us from Nationwide, and as a true leader now at NCBA CLUSA on the executive committee as our treasurer. So it's so good to have Devin here to introduce our keynote.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that introduction, and it's just great to be here with you guys. I'm always excited to get together with this group. Obviously, you know, through the pandemic, we haven't had this opportunity, but it has been so refreshing to see people again and talk and connect and really talk about what we're all very passionate about. As Doug mentioned, you know, Nationwide as a mutual organization, we were founded on cooperative principles. And it allows us to actually be what I think is one of the best insurance companies in the world. And protecting people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care. And that's our mission. And it aligns so much with the organizations that are represented in this room and online, and just so thrilled to be here. It's also a great opportunity and a privilege and an honor here to be introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Karama Neal. So welcome, and we're so glad to have you here. If you'll allow me, I'll just give you a little bit more background here, and then we'll get right into it. So Dr. Neal is the Administrator of Rural Business Cooperative Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In this role, she oversees programs that help businesses grow, as well as job training for people that are living in rural areas, near and dear to my heart, growing up on a farm in Iowa. And the USDA Rural Development Group, which operates with a $225 billion loan portfolio, has offices in every state, also houses rural housing services and rural utilities. So quite a bit going on right there. In her own words, she describes her personal mission as to promote equity, opportunity in health, education, and employment for all people through teaching, research, practice, advocacy, and service. Prior to time at USDA, Dr. Neal served as the president of Southern Bancorp Community Partners, a nonprofit community development loan fund and a financial development organization promoting economic mobility in rural Arkansas and Mississippi. And during her time with Southern, she focused on public policy work and a variety of financial development services to help low and moderate wealth families and communities build wealth. In 2013, Dr. Neal started a statewide grassroots organization promoting passage of the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act in Arkansas, which was passed in 2015. This work was inspired by our family's own ownership of rural heirs property in the state. Dr. Neal is has an undergraduate degree in biology from Swarthmore College, a doctorate in genetics from Emory University, and a master's degree in bioethics and health policy from Loyola University in Chicago. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Karama Neal.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for the warm introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It is really exciting. I was able to talk with some folks earlier, and Cooperatives have been near and dear to my heart for a long time, so it's a real pleasure to be able to talk with you all today. We are thrilled to be here to help celebrate National Cooperative Month. My colleagues, many of my colleagues are here. Please, Andrew Jamalowitz is here, and then we have some other folks who are listening in. And they have shared how excited they are to be here. I've gotten reports on the conference as we've gone through, and I know it's been a really exciting conversation. We are particularly pleased that Agriculture Secretary Thomas Vilsack will be joining you all tomorrow. And collectively, we want to be your partners in prosperity. Cooperatives, we understand, are key to prosperity, as this very business model helps people retain individual, family, and community wealth. So again, we are thrilled to be with you here today to help celebrate cooperatives and to celebrate National Cooperative Month. USDA's commitment to cooperatives began almost 100 years ago. In the 1920s, USDA created a division of cooperative research and assistance for farmer co-ops. About a decade later, we helped rural electric cooperatives bring electricity to America's farms, small towns, and rural urban and byways. Today, we are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with tens of thousands of successful cooperatives that bring prosperity, ownership, and pride to the communities they serve. Cooperatives contribute so much to our economy and to the quality of life in America's rural towns, farming communities. And as this tried and true concept evolves, co-ops are having an outsized impact in urban areas as well. Across the United States, there are more than 30,000 cooperatives operating more than 73,000 places of business. These co-ops support agriculture, utilities, financial services, food services, housing, home care, health care, child care, and retail. Credit unions, of course, are also cooperatives and provide financial services to 1/3 of the nation's population. This is the month for celebrating cooperatives of all types in the United States. America's co-ops employ more than 2 million people and serve more than 350 million members, as many are members of more than one, and generate more than $650 billion in annual revenue. More than 1,700 agriculture co-ops in 9,500 locations across all 50 states contribute more than $200 billion in revenue to the nation's economy. With data and outcomes like these, it is fitting that the theme for this year's National Cooperative Month is Build Back for Impact. The very nature of cooperatives, your priorities, your goals, your impact, align well with USDA priorities. As I mentioned, you'll be hearing later from Secretary Vilsack, but for now, I'd like to share the departmental priorities. USDA is committed to building rural economies, combating climate change, improving food security, building fair and resilient agricultural markets, and addressing long-standing inequities in USDA programs. Cooperatives are overall well-positioned to help contribute to each of these. Where particular cooperatives have a specific mission or set of activities that are related to one or more of these areas, we invite your engagement. And I'll share more on that later. In August, the Rural Development Mission Area, which, as we heard, houses Rural Business Cooperative Service, Rural Utility Service, and Rural Housing Service, the Rural Development Mission Area announced the ways in which we are implementing the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration and of the Department of Agriculture. We are particularly interested in and excited by projects that will support key administration priorities and that will help rural America build back better and stronger. Specifically, we're focused on assisting rural communities with recovering economically from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly disadvantaged communities. We want to reduce climate pollution and support increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change through economic support for rural communities, and ensuring that all rural residents have equitable access to rural development programs and benefit from rural development funded projects. These priorities are used for scoring and for the selection process for some of our programs, so our commitments are evident throughout our work. There are many opportunities, as you all know, I'm sure, that for cooperatives to address issues of equity, climate, and economic recovery. So I encourage you to visit our website. It's listed here on the slide. It's rd.usda.gov/priority-points to see the maps and the public data supporting the use of these priorities in project selection, and to learn how these priorities will apply or do apply now to the financing programs you may be interested in. One of the ways our work aligns us and the work that you all are doing in cooperatives is through sustainability. In that regard, USDA seeks to balance the goals of satisfying human needs, enhancing environmental quality, the resource base, and ecosystem services, sustaining the economic viability of agriculture, and enhancing the quality of life for farmers, ranchers, forest managers, workers, and society as a whole. Again, cooperatives as a model are one that we support. It is quite impressive to note, for example, that on the whole, agricultural cooperatives have endured the 2020 pandemic year quite well, navigating extraordinary challenges to continue serving their member owners. Last year, of course, though, is not an exception. 77% of agricultural cooperatives have been in existence for more than 50 years. Co-ops operate nimbly in challenging economic times. Their democratic structure allows them to pivot quickly and provide positive impact for their members, workers, and communities. And today, when many people are seeking work that has community meaning and personal value, cooperatives can offer the advantage of authenticity. Cooperatives are a model of economic sustainability and an economic bedrock for all kinds of communities. Organized to meet the economic needs of its member owners, a cooperative is particularly resilient and sustainable in its business form. Cooperatives are essential to the U.S. economy, especially rural communities where they often fill market gaps. Agricultural cooperatives provide effective marketing, low-cost supplies and services to their member owners and cooperatives to bring electricity, e-connectivity, affordable housing, capital, financial services, telecommunications, healthcare, food, hardware, it goes on, right? Building supplies, and countless other goods and services to people across the country. These are the goods and services that help sustain communities. As you know, there's been a lot of recent conversation about infrastructure that lasts and that has long-term sustainable impact. Rural electric co-ops power 3/4 of the nation's landmass and play a crucial role in the upkeep, improvement, and safety of our energy grid. In addition to helping agricultural producers and rural businesses and communities lower energy costs, their dedication to modernizing and advancing electric infrastructure also helps protect the environment. Our rural electric co-ops also demonstrate extraordinary commitment to community by providing significant disaster recovery services, often to areas thousands of miles away from their own member organizations. And today, along with rural telecommunications cooperatives, the nation's electric cooperatives are doing valuable work, expanding high-speed broadband internet services across the rural landscape. This work helps make rural America more competitive, promoting job creation and improving access to education and health care. As you can tell by our name, of course, Rural Business Cooperative Service, part of our work is to help sustain cooperatives. We do so through a variety of programs and services, some of which are cooperative specific. For example, the Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program improves the economic condition of rural areas by helping individuals and businesses start, expand, or improve rural cooperatives and other mutually owned businesses through cooperative development centers. Nonprofit organizations and institutions of higher education are eligible to apply for this program, and funds can be used for developing and operating a rural cooperative development center. Examples of technical assistance and other services the centers provide include conducting feasibility studies, developing business plans, providing leadership and operational improvement training, and facilitating strategic planning. Program funding was at $5.8 million for 2021, with a maximum grant allowed being $200,000. The scoring of applications was held recently in September, and funding will be announced soon. So this program has recently closed for the year, but we encourage you to visit the website to get more details and learn when it will reopen if you're interested in applying. Another of our cooperative-specific funding programs is the Socially Disadvantaged Groups Grant. This program provides technical assistance to socially disadvantaged groups through cooperatives and cooperative development centers. The funds must be used to provide technical assistance to socially disadvantaged groups in rural areas, and examples of that technical assistance include feasibility studies, business plans, strategic planning, and leadership planning. A total of $3 million was available for the Socially Disadvantaged Groups Grant in fiscal year 21, generating grants of up to $175,000 to cooperative development centers and cooperatives to, again, provide this kind of technical assistance. So again, please visit the website to learn more about when to apply. This grant also is closed at the end of the fiscal year. A lot of programs are closed now, but they'll be reopening soon. So we encourage you to visit now to learn more about the program and how to apply. Cooperatives are also eligible for many of the other rural development grants and guaranteed loan programs. For example, the Value-Added Producer Grant Program can help cooperatives add value to crops their members produce. The goals of this program are to generate new products, create and expand market opportunities, and increase producer income. Applications may receive priority if they are proposing a mid-tier value chain or are for a beginning farmer or rancher, a socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher, a small or medium-sized farm structured as a family farm, or, importantly for this audience, a farmer or rancher cooperative. Another program I want to highlight is for lenders. Lenders serving cooperatives and others may be interested in the Business and Industry Loan Guarantee Program. Depending on the project, lenders working with cooperatives in particular can get their loans of up to $40 million partially guaranteed, reducing the risk to the lender. If you are a lender or you're looking for financing for your cooperative, again, I encourage you to visit the website to learn more. Also, interested lenders may be interested in attending our October 14th webinar to learn how to become approved lenders through the Business and Industry Program and our other loan guarantee programs. That webinar is 1 week from today on the 14th, and so I encourage you to visit rd.usda.gov/1rdguarantee, that's all one word at the end, 1RD guarantee, to register. There's links on the website if you go to the website there. The webinar will be recorded, and so if you have a conflict on Thursday, you can view it later and still get the information you need to apply to become an approved lender. And again, I think it's important to recognize sometimes people think of lenders in this situation, they think only of banks. Of course, this is open to credit unions, this is open to CDFI loan funds, to a variety of lenders. And so again, want to encourage you to attend that October 14th webinar to learn more about that opportunity to participate in those loan guarantee programs. So cooperatives, of course, are eligible for a variety of rural development, business, and community programs, community development programs, including those focused on COVID response, energy, housing, water, environmental services, and broadband programs. So a real wide variety throughout our three sister agencies. Funding, of course, is just part of the story. Like you all, we know that the cooperative movement benefits from research, education, technical assistance, and more. We hope that you'll peruse the collection of recent and archival publications, including titles like Cooperatives 101, How to Start a Cooperative, Federal Statutes of Special Importance to Farmer Cooperatives, Tax Law for Cooperatives, Agricultural Cooperative Statistics, and many other research reports, service reports, and cooperative information reports. The team at our Cooperative Service Branch does an excellent job. They're very dedicated to providing technical assistance to existing and aspiring cooperatives, and they serve the cooperative community by doing things like, for example, speaking at this conference. So we encourage you to reach out to them. In recognition of the role the cooperative business model plays throughout the U.S. economy and the opportunity presented by the federal and other activities in support of cooperatives, Congress, through the Agricultural Act of 2014, authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to coordinate and chair an interagency working group to foster cooperative development and ensure coordination with federal agencies and national and local organizations that have cooperative programs and interests. So we at RBCS are pleased to convene the Interagency Working Group for Cooperative Development. Planning for the next meeting, to be held later this month, is underway, and topics will include issues that we've heard from you all about, things like food production, aggregation, processing, distribution, and access, the care economy, including elder care, child care, and care for people with disabilities, including veterans, and conversions of businesses to worker cooperatives. So we look forward to working with you and with your organizations and with our colleagues in the federal family to realize the full potential of the Interagency Working Group for Cooperative Development. So I mentioned that I would talk a little bit about engagement. So as I close, I would encourage you to really engage with us. Some of you may have participated in our recent listening session on the Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program. You all shared your thoughts on how to streamline the application process, when the application period should be held, how long the grant period should be, how to measure success and sustainability, and more. We appreciate your feedback, and I'll say, we go back to that feedback and we use that as justification for making the kinds of requests that you all want. So that feedback is really, really appreciated. We welcome it, and we welcome your input as we strive to meet the needs and objectives of the cooperative sector. We also encourage you to reach out to the nearest one of our almost 400 state and area offices to get started. They are truly the front door to RBCS programs and services, and our staff, some of whom, of course, are with us today, stand ready to work with you and work on your projects. My contact information is going to be on the next slide. It's karama.neal@usda.gov, and you'll see our website, rd.usda.gov, and a toll-free number where you can get additional information, 1-800-670-6553. Again, thank you for your time, thank you for your intention, thank you for your dedication to this sector. I know that you'll be hearing from other USDA and other federal colleagues during this conference, and I hope that you know that we look forward to working and talking with you all, with each of you. Thank you. On behalf of USDA, I offer a heartfelt thanks to you all, America's member-driven cooperatives. We look forward to continuing our partnership and cultivating the shared prosperity in America's communities. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Dr. Neal, thank you for spending time with us, with our virtual audience today, with the people here at the National Press Club in the ballroom. And what a lot of people don't know is that Dr. Neal and a number of her senior staff chose to come over in the middle of the morning and spent time talking one-on-one and in groups with the cooperative community, which is just terrifically generous. And it's such an important signal from USDA, from Dr. Neal, on just how important she believes that the cooperative strategies are, to the larger strategy of building back better. So we do really deeply appreciate your time today. I'll say that I've had a chance to meet Dr. Neal virtually, I guess probably 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 months ago as she came on. I believe it was in April, one of the early appointees for the administration. And I had an opportunity to serve in a prior administration, and so I had a little bit of an idea of what Dr. Neal was getting into. And I'll say that I was deeply impressed from the very first moment on her understanding of not only the rural geography and the needs of rural communities, but also the sophisticated understanding of what it takes to support rural businesses, rural cooperatives, and rural communities. Technical assistance, capacity building, and of course finance, which she's been a real leader in for years. So we're terrifically fortunate to have you there. It's really a champion for cooperatives in the federal government, so thanks again. So everyone, we are now going to take a break, but before we do that, we're going to take questions. I wasn't I didn't know this was happening, so surprise. This is fantastic. So folks, think about some great questions for Dr. Neal, and she is come on back up, and we've already we'll be able to have a bit more of a conversation with you. More of your generosity.
Happy to. Welcome your questions and your comments. Yes, please.
I saw one of the key priorities was reducing inequities within USDA, and just wanted to understand what do you see as some of these standing inequities, and what are some of the initiatives to reduce that?
Yeah, so I think I'll speak specifically from the context of RBCS, because I think we have quite a bit of information on our website, that website that I mentioned, rd.usda.gov/priority-points, where we talk. I know why I remember that one, but I do. I think, you know, the part of what we wanted to do is really address exactly that question, right? Because that, when you see equity, that means a lot of different things to different people. That can be applied in a lot of different ways. And so we really wanted to be intentional about thinking about what that meant in the context of RBCS. And so what you'll find on the website is information about how we're defining equity. And we're thinking a lot about geographic equity. You may remember in one of the slides I talked about, for rural development in particular, talked about making sure that there is equitable access to our programs across geography. So that's a big part of how we're thinking about that, is making sure that people have access to our programs. Part of what we're intentional about as well is, as we think about our programs, there's been a real attention to modernization of our work, both in terms of staffing, in terms of IT services, and in terms of our programs. Many of our programs are based in legislation that's decades old in some cases. And so it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it might be able to benefit from some refreshing, right? And some modernization to that extent. And so I think the idea of equity is something that infuses a lot of the work that we're doing, really all the work that we're doing, so that as we think about how do we think about our staffing, how do we think about our program modernization, we have those goals in mind. And particularly from an RD perspective, we have the goal in mind of how do we make sure that everybody throughout the country who needs these programs, who wants these programs, who has goals for their communities, can have access to these programs. Sometimes that's an issue of money, sometimes that's an issue of match, sometimes that's an issue of staffing. It can take a variety of formats. Sometimes it's a way, and what you'll see on that website is discussion around priority points. So thinking through how if we have a group of applications, and maybe some are equal in some respects, do we give some additional points to one that is in a place where they've not had access to these programs before? So I'd encourage you to visit that site. That's how we think about it. I think there are a lot of ways that other folks throughout USDA are thinking about it. There have been a number of programs, and I would hesitate to talk in depth about those because I'm this close to them, like not directly involved with all of those USDA programs, but it is a constant source of direction for the work that we're doing, and we want to be really intentional about doing that, particularly in rural development. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I appreciate there's a lot on your plate, and as you know, the needs of rural communities are great, and hence the interagency work group. Mm-hmm. So you're new to your tenure, but have you thought about it and look at some focus areas? I mean, there are plenty of resources, it seems, in other agencies, and that was the intent. How do we bring it to bear on the needs in rural communities? Yeah, so the interagency working group, thank you for the question. The interagency working group on cooperative development is not necessarily limited to rural areas. Our work is limited to rural areas in most cases. But this interagency working group, I think that's one of the benefits, right? Is so we can think through and intentionally, where we have a real intentional focus on cooperatives. Obviously, our name, we have it in the name of our agency. We can take that information and take our experience, take our learnings, take our skill set that we have, that we are using in rural areas, and hopefully maybe inform or encourage other agencies, other federal agencies, to use similar kinds of work, do similar kinds of things in urban areas. So, for example, one of the things we try to be really intentional about is making sure that there aren't undue, unnecessary, arbitrary, capricious barriers to cooperatives participating in our programs, right? So I started and I listed, 2 of our cooperative specific programs that are really only limited to cooperatives, but that's not the only things that cooperatives can participate in, right? We can participate, you all can participate in a variety of RBCS programs and rural development programs. And we want to be intentional about creating those programs, writing them in such a way so that they're not barriers to our cooperatives unless there's some reason that there needs to be. I don't know what that would be, but if there's, we want to be really intentional about that. And so I think particularly right now, if you go on USDA's Build Back Better website, for example, you'll see discussion of the frankly large sums of money that are being used to help, in the case of USDA build back better in terms of our community, but really across the federal system,
right? So there are significant sums of money, and we want to make sure that as we are developing new programs, as we are adding to existing programs or have that opportunity to modernize those programs, those kinds of things, that we make sure to include cooperatives where it makes sense, and certainly remove barriers to cooperative participation in places where we can do that. And I think the Interagency Working Group provides an opportunity, a forum for us to share our experience, and frankly to learn from others as well, right? There may be things that others are doing that we can learn from too, and we can share that and hopefully create a stronger environment for cooperatives to work and to thrive.
Virtual question from Jessica Gordon-Nimhard, PhD, professor at CUNY and Co-op Hall of Famer. Many of us talk about the need for uniform federal co-op and corporation laws. Is this on the USDA's agenda?
So, we're not in the position to advocate for those kinds of laws. We certainly appreciate your feedback on those. And so, if there are particular things that you are interested in, particular types of legislation, I think that's important to consider, to reach out to your elected officials to make sure that they understand what your goals are and what your needs are. We work to execute those laws as after they've been created. And so your input on developing them is exactly what's needed. And so I would just encourage you to reach out to folks. And I think the other piece to that, and this is, I didn't exactly ask about this, but I think is thinking about the state level as well, right? Are there laws at the state level, or the tribal level, to be able to do the kinds of work that you want to do too? And I think, again, hearing directly from people is really important. I'll say, that may sound trivial. I think sometimes you can think, well, do they hear me? Do they actually listen to me? Like, do they really use that? And I will say they actually do. We actually do. We definitely see, as we're developing programs and those kinds of things, this isn't the legislative piece, but it goes to the input and the engagement, which I was hoping to emphasize as well, that, if we're developing something, we think there's a good idea that we need to do something in one way or another, we will get asked by our attorneys, by the Office of General Counsel, what is the justification for that? Do you have public support for that? And we'll go back to those public comments. We'll go back to what we're hearing from people to say, yes, this is what we're hearing. And if we're not hearing that, then we might not get what we need, even if we've heard informally from people. So that kind of written, documented, recorded engagement throughout the government is really critical and is very much welcomed.
Hi, I'm Oscar Perry-Bello. I'm with Next City. I'm just curious about, is there a political pushback or downside to just taking off the population limits on the Rural Development Program? I know it's called the Rural Development Program, but these are some of the only federal programs that are dedicated to cooperatives. And I know there are places like in Cleveland, for example, where some of USDA programs have had an impact in a major urban area. I'm just curious if that's something that is on the administration's priority to bring back on the radar, or if there's pushback, I'm curious what the pushback is.
I will say honestly, that's not, and I'm, as you heard, fairly new in my role, so I've not heard that particular request yet. But doesn't mean it hasn't been around. So I've looked at my colleagues who've been doing this work in this role for a little while longer. But I appreciate you mentioning that. I will say I think that goes back to the Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development. I think there's a real opportunity there, right? So there are, I think there are ways in which our experience with cooperatives in rural areas, because you're right, they are pretty much limited to rural areas, as are, frankly, the vast majority of our programs are limited to rural areas. We're rural development. But that doesn't mean that what we're learning can't be applied or can't be used by other agencies that may have no geographic restrictions at all. And so I think that in the context of the Interagency Working Group, there's maybe potential for having those kinds of conversations and seeing what might be possible there. And I'll check with my colleagues as I get back and learn a little bit more about maybe the history of that, if there has been pushback or concerns. I just don't know that, so I'll have to pull back a little bit from that one, but I look forward to learning more about it. Other questions? Well, again, I very much appreciate you all's engagement, appreciate the work that you're doing. It is really important and it is valuable, and we are, again, excited to be your partners as we go through this. So thank you again very much.
Dr. Neal, thank you for taking the time to take questions as well. That was, I think, some really, really important and valuable information for our community. Next, we're going to go for a break, and we're looking forward to our next session, which will start at 1:30. And we're going to continue the conversation on policy. And in the next session, it's going to be focused on advocacy. We'll have Kate Latour, our Director of Government Relations, along with a number of cooperative advocate colleagues, and we're really looking forward to it. So please come back, join us at 1:30, and we look forward to the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
On the end, get the end one. Get the blue table. Down here.
and a hush falls over the room. It's very nice. We are going to be starting in about 5 minutes. Just wanted to give everybody a 5-minute call here. The live stream will resume in 5 minutes. If you, when the program starts, if you can minimize the amount of movement in the room, that really helps with the live feed. So please continue your conversation, and we will get started here in just a couple of minutes, and we'll start with Doug O'Brien as he comes up. So just a few minutes. All right, folks, come on in. We're about to start our program. Please come in, make yourself comfortable. Too bad there's not cookies left on the table, I can't see. I'd entice everyone to come in with some cookies. But thank you again for being here, and I'll turn the program over to NCBA Inclusive's President and CEO, Doug O'Brien. Hey, Doug.
Welcome back, everybody. Everybody here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and for our virtual audience across the country and across the world. It's good to be back this afternoon. Thank you for being part of the fourth day as we move in to this afternoon's content. Really excited about this next session, which is focusing on advocacy in today's environment. It's been such an active time in the last couple years. We as a cooperative community, when we entered into the pandemic era, and the federal government was very active in providing support for businesses, we were all able to band together to make sure that essentially all cooperatives were eligible for that assistance. And with data, and admittedly somewhat imperfect data, but the data that we have access to, we saw that close to 2,000 cooperatives, maybe up to close to 1.9 or $2 billion worth of capital and financing went to save these community-owned businesses. And the only reason that happened is because the cooperative community came together in one voice to stand up for each other in mutual self-help, one of our values. As we look at embracing our cooperative identity, this next panel will look at what does that mean in our advocacy agenda. I think what we learned in that early part of the pandemic, we need to apply now. We see the federal government in the last months and perhaps into the future, providing some historic levels of resources for community economic development. We at NCBA CLUS have been working very hard to make sure that cooperatives are understood as a strategy, a preferred strategy, to build communities back that are equitable, that are sustainable, that meet today's challenges. And so the panel today will be talking about some of the work across the cooperative community around advocacy and the opportunities and the challenges and how we can work together to be more effective for our members of cooperatives and for cooperatives. And now I'd like to hand it over to the moderator for today's panel, our wonderful Director of Government Relations at NCBA CLUSA, Kate Latour. Kate.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm actually just going to invite Juan and Dania up right away because they are the experts here and really want to hear their perspectives. So we are joined today by Juan Fernandez, President and CEO of the Credit Union Association of New Mexico, and Dania Davey, the Director of Land Retention and Advocacy at the Federation of Southern Cooperative Land Assistance Fund. So thank you both for being here. And actually, I just wanted to get started by kind of introducing folks, for those who don't know Juan and Dania, what your role is now and how you got into the kind of co-op community. Juan, do you want to start out?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Isn't it a great time to be a cooperative? First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. And as of June 1st, I came back to New Mexico and became the first Latino to be a Credit Union Association CEO. And I cannot wait to get started bringing cooperatives together with credit unions to really tackle some of the challenges and issues that a state like New Mexico faces. Some of them were identified earlier today when we were discussing Native American issues. So I got started in cooperatives at a really early age, in fact, in grammar school. So the school that I attended in Puerto Rico for grammar school had a little store. And it was actually student-owned cooperative. So I actually learned about co-ops at a really early age and became a member.
Good luck, Dania. I should have gone first.
Before I actually learned of credit unions, which happened when I was in my teens, and I got into banking at an internship when I was in high school, and then eventually learned about cooperative financial services and credit unions when I was 19. And I've been in credit unions ever since. I've also served on the board of directors of the local food co-op in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Shout out to La Montañita Food Co-op. And it's a passion of mine. I think we, like Doug always says, we are in the beginning of a cooperative moment. And it's ours for us to seize. And I'm just excited to be part of it all.
I'm so excited to jump into several of those points. Dania, you go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know how to follow that. But I'm Dania Davey, and I am the Director of Land Retention and Advocacy at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And my history with cooperatives doesn't go that far back, but I like to think that I'm a part of a legacy of cooperatives. I'm originally from Jamaica, and my maternal grandfather and great-grandfather were actually from Hong Kong and moved to Jamaica and formed supermarket cooperatives. And that's how my grandfather made it to Jamaica. I did not understand or know that history until I was much older and focused on different things. But in school, I was very interested in disparities in health outcomes. So I went to law school thinking that I was going to work on health equity issues, and that's not quite where my legal career took me. I ended up in Mississippi and met Ben Burkett, who I now work with. He's the director, the state coordinator for the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives. And he explained to me some of the issues that were facing Black farmers at the time. And so I was fortunate enough to get a legal fellowship to work on estate planning and access to land and farm transfer and sustainability issues for Black farmers in particular. And then actually the nonprofit I was working with, the Land Loss Prevention Project, lost funding for my position. So I went in a very different career, and I decided I wasn't coming back to the nonprofit world until I felt like I could really make an impact. And so when this opportunity at the Federation, which was the organization that through Ben first introduced me to the needs of the Black farming community, I couldn't think of a better way. And so it's really now, in the past 6 months that I've been in this role, that I've really started to actually make some of those connections to my personal history. As a matter of fact, on the episode of the Federation Conversation podcast, I was playing it for my mom, and she was like, oh my goodness, this is what Michael Manley was trying to do in Jamaica. He was really trying to make cooperatives become a movement in Jamaica, and that was part of, what the United States did not like about what was happening in Jamaica at the time. But I'm really very excited about this movement and people like you who have this wide range of expertise in cooperatives, because I really do think that without cooperatives and working together, there really isn't a future economy, and that's been made very clear during the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you. And two plugs there. One, Ben Burkett, who was inducted last year to the Cooperative Hall of Fame, and also for the Federation Conversation, which launched this week. So subscribe on Spotify. So just to jump into the kind of the advocacy component of it, it has been an enormously busy. On top of all of the other challenges that we're facing, there has been so much action, right? I think Congress is deeply motivated by disaster and deadlines. So we are seeing that kind of on the forefront right now. So one of the first, well, actually, let me back up. Start on a really kind of in the sense of these stories, right? I know I've seen a lot of examples of co-ops really, or associations for that matter, stepping up in really, I think, special ways that emulate the cooperative difference. Do you have kind of an example that has really stuck with you through this time of your co-op members or co-ops in your community kind of stepping up and rising to the occasion?
Sure. So I'm really excited about our regional marketing work to get our cooperatives engaged in the disaster relief efforts, one of which was we were able to work with our member farmers and cooperatives to send 40,000 pounds of produce from the southeast up to the north. And we continue our food box program, which has donated over 1,400 boxes of food for families. And so we're really kind of bridging that gap between the community need and the access for food that we know in these rural communities, as well as urban communities, quite frankly. There's definitely a need. And so bridging that gap through our marketing work with our cooperatives is really an important link in the chain between the cooperative and the community.
Thank you.
I think cooperatives, in a way, if you think about it, we're built for crisis. I know the credit union movement really thrived during the Great Depression because we were delivering financial services to people that nobody else was, and we saw huge growth. The last 18 to 24 months have been really, really difficult for our communities, for our members. and in our case for credit union leadership, because it's really hard to manage an organization when you have a health crisis, a financial crisis. You have employees that you don't want to get sick but may get sick, and credit unions are first responders. I mean, they're there much like food co-op folks, you know, meeting face to face with members during this crisis. And I've been so inspired by the work that cooperators have done to deliver to small businesses through PPP, to deliver to communities, bringing financial services, loan forgiveness. In Washington State, Canopy Credit Union, a CDFI member of NCBA CLUSA, launched and rolled out a program along with some other credit unions in the state to do rental assistance for people that had lost their jobs during the pandemic and couldn't pay their rents. So I just, you know, I'll end with saying that I am just so, my heart just gets so full when I see cooperatives really thinking outside the box, innovating, and delivering for our members and our communities.
Yeah, I think one of the examples that always sticks with me too, and for those that don't know me, I'm from Wisconsin, so I have a very heavy Wisconsin bias in some of these examples. But you know, thinking of folks like the Madison-based Isthmus Engineering Company, and they have the capacity to make face shields, and we're able to donate some of those to home care cooperatives and folks who are, you know, by nature of their job on the front lines. And really facing this crisis head on. And so just seeing that kind of collaboration and Principle 6 will also be a theme throughout this conversation that I think is really exciting, kind of part of the moment that we're in. So you both touched on it a little bit, backing up to some of the policies that have been and programs have been enacted. Doug touched on it as well around the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. I think those are kind of the two biggest small business programs that were really launched. Paycheck protection was administered through private lenders, and again, P6 here. Credit unions stepped up in a huge way. Our farm credit institutions, mission-based lenders like CoBank and National Cooperative Bank, as well as CDFIs who have these really kind of grassroots relationships. And to Doug's point earlier too, because it is not always institutionalized in some agencies that cooperatives should be treated like other businesses, there was a real galvanization across the sectors to make the case to Congress that co-ops should have equitable access to these programs. So it did result in over $2 billion of assistance to these small businesses. I think over 3,000 co-ops accessed the programs and saved tens of thousands of jobs. So I think those are just, you know, in the SBA examples, but I wonder if both of you can speak a little bit more to the ways in which your member associations engaged with those programs, both kind of what worked really well, how they stepped up, as well as some of the challenges that you had to kind of work through. You could start.
Sure. So first of all, I mean, huge kudos to the cooperative movement and to you personally and Doug and the rest of the folks at NCBA CLUSA for really stepping up to the plate and educating and working with the legislature and the executive office and convincing them to making sure that co-ops had access to PPP. I mean, that was huge, and it's a huge accomplishment. And I know I was just visiting with a treasurer of a food co-op in Connecticut, and her co-op was able to take advantage of PPP. I know other food co-ops as well, and I really do think that it really might have saved many cooperatives from going under because it was so important. So in New Mexico, credit unions really stepped up. Even credit unions that were small, that didn't have business lending programs, stepped up and worked with the SBA on rolling out the PPP program. And once again, that's just an example of them doing this because they wanted to make sure their communities had access to these resources. What didn't work, obviously, they were setting up these programs on the fly. So of course there was a lot of challenges as to how it was administered and all of that. But you know, we had a direct line of communication with the state regional office. And communicated with them some of the issues that were there, and they addressed them. For credit unions and other CDFIs, one of the biggest victories was that throughout this whole process, we had the biggest investment in CDFIs, but to the tune of over $12 billion. Much of that went out for the Rapid Response Program, which once again infused grant dollars to credit unions to leverage and bring economic development. And we've started having conversations in New Mexico. How can we leverage some of those dollars to tackle some of the issues that we have in the communities in cooperation with other cooperative sectors? In addition to that, there's $9 billion that it's going to be deployed to minority deposit institutions. And also as far as secondary capital, because what's happened, at least in the credit union space, is there's been an infusion of deposits over the last 18 months, and that's lowered capital net worth ratios in credit unions. So that's going to be huge as we continue keeping credit unions healthy and thriving as they go through these really tough times. So those are just some of the examples of some of the things that we as a movement and in conjunction with other cooperative sectors have worked to achieve to help and bring really much needed relief for our members.
And just to kind of tack on to that too, the credit unions not only help to administer the loans, but with Paycheck Protection, those have the opportunity to be 100% forgivable. And so the process isn't done, right? Effectively, they can turn into a loan, and it's helping those businesses really make sure they can get to that end goal, which I know has been not always a very streamlined process, but again, it's a brand new program and set up kind of on the fly. And Danny, I know this was very SBA focused, but either within SBA or USDA programs, what kind of from that initial disaster response really was the kind of top contributor for your work?
Yeah, so going back in time, in 1910 there were 218,000 black farmers, and by 1992 there were 18,000 black farmers, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that we're still here, we still have black farmers, we still have black farming cooperatives, that is a testament to all of the advocacy and the intervention of the federal government, and many times have been really important to keeping that pipeline going. With regard to the Federation, 54 years ago, 22 cooperatively owned businesses came together because at the intersection of civil rights and the black cooperative movement, there were folks who were losing their livelihoods because they were demanding civil rights. And it's kind of, like we're back in time in many ways with what's been going on last summer and this demand for racial equity. It's kind of like we're seeing this resurgence and this new interest among folks of the younger generation who really don't understand that black cooperative movement history or the history, quite frankly, of the Federation. And so I think that the USDA's programs have been very, very critical in terms of affording our black farm cooperatives the opportunity to do what they need to do, right? To really think creatively, think strategically. Without our farmers, we actually have a trademark. Farmers are first responders. It was so funny when you said that, because that's something we think about all the time, is that in our rural communities where folks have limited access to everything you can imagine. Even think about one of the challenges is a lot of these programs, the applications are where? Online. And we're in rural communities where people barely have, regular phone service. So that's a huge barrier. There are even USDA offices that now have apps. So you go to the meeting and they're telling people how to apply using an app, and people are like, but how do I access it? How do I access it without the internet? So that's a huge barrier, and I feel like there's a way in which some of these gaps are getting larger, and so it creates a bigger opportunity for cooperatives to fill all of those needs. I think we're definitely seeing the need for more infrastructure with regard to technology, and that was something that we did notice a lot during the pandemic, was that our folks with limited access to internet, we're still very, very actively engaged in webinars. So we hosted webinars to tell them what programs were available through the USDA, what COVID relief was available to farmers. When the debt relief program was rolled out, we had webinar programs available, and people accessed them and they used them. And so now the challenge is for us to think strategically about making sure that that infrastructure is institutionalized and making sure that the access is broader, and that will continue to survive the next 54 years.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. No, that's a great point, and I think that kind of grassroots work, one, on the first responders front, I think by very nature of cooperatives' connection to their community makes them well positioned for that, but just really institutionalizing this so that God forbid, when the next crisis does hit, we have kind of these systems in place. Juan, you touched on it a little bit, but can you share a little bit more for those outside of the CDFI and credit union space about the Rapid Response Program that was part of the December legislation, which doesn't have a fun name, so it kind of, people don't remember it as much, but there was really exciting stuff in there. So if you don't mind giving a little bit more context on, what those awards are for and kind of what the plans people have been talking about with them.
Sure. So back in the mid-90s, the Clinton administration formed the CDFI program through the U.S. Treasury. And on average, I think some of the highest grant cycles were maybe a couple $100 million. And these are dollars that are going not just to credit unions, but as we learned earlier this morning, they're going to CDFIs in general. Many of them are loan funds, some of them are banks, and then about 30% of all CDFIs are credit unions. And last year was actually a significant victory for the CDFI movement because there were $12 billion, by far the biggest infusion of grants and capital to CDFIs, not only CDFIs, but also minority deposit institutions. So those funds are still being rolled out. The Rapid Response Program, those grant dollars were announced in May, I want to say. And in New Mexico, for example, 5 CDFI credit unions received over $10.3 million in grants. And that for a state that only has 2 million people is huge. It's an amazing and significant infusion of grant dollars. And now the exciting part will be how we come together to leverage those dollars. And in my opinion, we have a huge opportunity to partner loan funds, minority deposit institutions, CDFIs, credit unions, with other cooperative sectors to tackle some of the issues that we have, because we have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I don't think in our lifetimes we'll ever see $12 billion going to CDFIs, MDIs, and credit unions. So I'm really excited for what's going to be possible, what's going to be made possible with that. I think we have an opportunity to bring different cooperative sectors together to tackle things like home affordability, economic vitality, helping minority-owned businesses not only be started and grow but thrive. So I think this is going to be game-changing and a game changer when it comes to really showing the value of the cooperative model and credit unions and minority deposit institutions and loan funds that are CDFIs for the community at large.
I am similarly excited, as you might guess, for just the real potential. I mean, several of the award winners of this program are members of NCBA CLUSA, folks in our community who are familiar with lending to co-ops and how to partner with, worker co-ops, housing co-ops, food co-ops, but there are also a lot who are not. And I think it's, again, a unique opportunity where people are kind of reevaluating how we are investing these dollars and taking, though co-ops are a time-tested model, maybe something that they can add to their repertoire. So I personally am also very excited for that potential. Dania, also in the December legislation was $4 billion for building more resilient local food systems. And that's housed at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, ranging from, starting with production and going all the way through the food supply chain to consumers. Can you talk a little bit about where you think the Federation has and your farmers have really ripe opportunity to participate, and in your dream world, kind of what those dollars would go towards?
Well, I think that we really need a lot more infrastructure. And sometimes when people hear infrastructure, they think highways, and they think of things that people need in urban environments. But one of the challenges that, as I was speaking to during the COVID crisis, was we actually have infrastructure needs down to processing facilities, down to having access to refrigeration, transportation. All of these things are huge gaps that we're trying to coordinate, like a regional cooperative marketing effort, so that we can make sure that all of those investments are made, because people really kind of take for granted that if once the co-op is formed, then it's just going to be successful. But we really, in the rural areas, we don't have, there's some meat processing facilities that have 18-month waiting lists for people to even have access to bring their goats or whatever they are bringing to process before they can sell it at market. And so there's some really fundamental needs that we continue to have. I already spoke to the issue of the internet. That is one that we've been working with at our rural training facility in Epps, Alabama, trying to ensure that that community and our members have access to a reliable source of internet so that they can participate in events like this and get the information that they need to access all of these programs. I think that beyond the infrastructure, we have our local rural child care cooperatives that the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives has been working with. My colleague Terrence in the back has been working with a group of fisher folk down in Matagorda Bay, Texas, and they need, wharf space, or what is it, like, they need dock space to be able to be successful. And the Matagorda Bay project is interesting in particular. There's a lot of crossover between the environment and agriculture, and I think that's becoming a far more obvious need, that now that it's not taboo to say that there's climate change, that's a huge change. Does anyone agree with that? Like, yes. COVID made people realize that there's climate change, and we've been like advocating for that since Captain Planet. And now we're all at home for a year and realize that it's a real thing. And so I think that, in Matagorda Bay in particular, the Army Corps of Engineers is planning to do some dredging, and that's probably going to bring more mercury into the bay, and these fisher folk will lose their livelihoods. And so it's really important that we put our members into every single program possible that the USDA rolls out, going all the way back to the last Farm Bill, to make sure that all of the things that they didn't get under the previous administration and that have been rolled out this year, they're able to access, and that we can make sure that we have a healthy environment, because the ecosystem, agriculture, farming, all of our co-ops kind of layer in on top of one another. So I think that if we had a dream world, an ideal world, we'd have infrastructure in terms of actual, production processing, as well as internet, as well as all of the things that folks need to be successful in their rural enterprises, whether it's childcare. We're at our housing association in Alabama as well. We're trying to form a tenant cooperative so that they can be decision makers over the rural health and fitness center that we have there. So we're really trying to infuse all of the values of cooperatives at every step of the chain, even in ways that are, not directly related to agriculture. They're related to rural communities thriving and really being successful. And so we're just making sure that we're reading every single policy that comes out, and we're trying to make sure that anytime there's an opportunity, it's not always just within what's available for forestry or agriculture, which we're kind of known for. It's all of these other sub-programs as well, and I think that will kind of give us the longevity that we need.
Mm-hmm. And the Federation was also part of a coalition that sent a letter to USDA after this legislation passed, really advocating for them to create this opportunity and use it creatively, right? So that there's financing tools of loans, grants, forgivable loans, just to really think broadly about how those dollars can be used. I also would connect the dots to the challenge in access to food in a lot of rural communities, particularly as kind of the small mom and pop grocery stores are having, they're approaching retirement and there's no immediate buyer, where very often the community makes the most sense to be the owner of that grocery store. And so really making sure that we can, all the way to the retail side, that people can access fresh foods at the most affordable prices and have that fresh access. Again, an example from Wisconsin, bear with me. But they did recently open a food co-op in northern Wisconsin and made a commitment to source at least 20% of the products served there from local farmers. I mean, I think that, again, it's in co-op's DNA that the investment dollars go further because it has these kind of ramifications outside of the singular business. So that was all last year, right? Skipping ahead to this year, there was the American Rescue Plan. That was, again, really sweeping legislation. Dania, I'm going to start with you. There's, I think, a lot of exciting opportunity, but particularly for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. So I'm just going to let you take it away from here and talk about that legislation.
Well, you know, one of the things that we were most excited about from the American Rescue Plan has kind of become one of the things that we're most distressed about. Section 1005 of the American Rescue Plan really kind of signaled a moment of cognition for this country of all of what the black farmers have faced throughout the history of this country. A lot of people know about the Pigford class action lawsuit, which was at that time the largest class action settlement against the federal government with civil rights allegations against the USDA for race-based discrimination against black farmers in accessing loans and access to credit. And I think a lot of people thought once Pigford was done, you know, check, we did it, right?
That's how it works, right? That's how it works.
But I think that when Section 1005 was announced, we were really excited because one of the issues that black farmers face is because of the lack of access to credit in general and the more traditional lenders, they often rely on the FSA loans. And at the very local level where those decisions are made, they face significant, to this day, race-based discrimination. And one of the biggest challenges they face is in loan servicing as well as over-collateralization of their loans. And so when 1005 was announced, the announcement was that 3,100 black farmers were going to be eligible for debt relief. So we were considering this a win because that was one of the things we advocated for under Pigford, was that the debt relief, because the loans are over collateralized and the servicing terms are unfavorable, the farmers have a very, very difficult time paying off their debts. And that's also resulting in the land loss rates that we're seeing in the community. And so the debt relief program was really what we thought was going to be this acknowledgement that this pattern and practice of race-based discrimination and access to credit and lending for black farmers was finally being acknowledged. Even though it was only 3,100 black farmers, we would take it, and we were going to, you know, just educate our farmers on how to access it and make sure that they did everything they needed to do so that they could start fresh and have successful farming enterprises. And then a lawsuit was filed, which turned into 13 lawsuits being filed, each of which have now had an impact on the implementation of the Section 1005 Emergency Debt Relief for Farmers and Ranchers of Color program. And so the 17,000 farmers and ranchers of color that were eligible for the debt relief are not receiving any of the debt relief at this time because there has been injunctive relief. The court has said that the program cannot be rolled out by the USDA, and now it's been certified by the Texas federal court as a class action, and so it's not clear whether it will ever be rolled out. So now we have farmers getting foreclosure notices and accelerated loan letters, which the USDA has guaranteed us they will not be taking that action, but these letters are still going out, and these farmers have kind of been in limbo waiting for the debt relief, or they've planned their farming season, and we're in harvest time, right? And so they plan their season based on this debt relief that never came. And so we're anticipating that that's going to have very deleterious impacts on our community. And so that's definitely a source of both, you know, promise and question for our community. Section 1006, though, also has some similar components of promise that we think will be realized. We're always very optimistic and hopeful, and Section 1006 provides significant funding for community-based organizations that have a history of working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to ensure that all of these you know, technical assistance, all of the outreach, all of the supports that are needed to have the infrastructure inputs. And by infrastructure, I mean like everything that we need, all the boots on the ground to make sure that we can assist our farmers in being successful. And so we'll see whether or not 1006 will face similar challenges. At this time, we're very optimistic about the fact that the administration is leading with equity, because equity also, I think, has been very elusive for our community. And we've noticed the gap has just continued to widen. Whenever these policies are announced, it feels like, you know, certain groups get ahead of us in line. And that's just been our fate, but we're excited about 1006. There's a huge amount of benefit in 106, and so we'll be calling on all of you to assist us with making sure that that one doesn't get halted.
Yeah, and that is a very wide, it's $1 billion. Again, these are all Bs we are dealing with, which is unprecedented. And that, one of those activities, which we were really excited to see in that as an eligible use of those dollars, allows cooperative development.
Yes.
Frankly, it's plain and simple. It is in there clear as day that one of the activities for whatever kind of the community-based organizations see fit, they can use those dollars towards those activities, which I think, again, will really deepen the ties, strengthen local ownership, which hopefully can kind of widen the base of ownership in communities. So, Juan, what's going on with credit unions in the American Rescue Plan?
Before we go there, I do want to kind of piggyback on something you said earlier. I couldn't agree more. I think the evidence of climate change is everywhere. And I think we as cooperators have a great opportunity to be part of the solution. And I know that whether it's all kinds of legislation this year are moving us closer toward addressing that issue. I mean, and so many of the places that are mostly being affected by climate change are places where minorities live. My native Puerto Rico in 2017 was hit by, you know, a Category 4 or 5 hurricane with sustained winds of over 150 miles per hour, as we all know, and it literally crisscrossed the island of Puerto Rico. And, you know, I'm sure, you know, the rest is history. You all know what happened. I mean, for over 6 months, most areas in Puerto Rico didn't have access to clean water, didn't have access to electricity. So imagine how that affected the cooperative sector. And the great news is that there were so many heroes that really rose to the occasion to deliver for their communities. And one of the things that I loved so much about it, not only did it show the resilience of the Puerto Rican people and the cooperatives, but there was such great collaboration between cooperatives. And it was really amazing. I'm looking forward to the day where those stories are told in a wider basis. And I do want to give a shout out to Inclusive, formerly known as the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions, because they, along with some of people in this room actually, went to Puerto Rico to help and to really help stand the cooperative sector back up. And Inclusive, along with the cooperative movement as a whole and the CDFI sector as a whole, really advocated for some really needed resources. And not to belabor the point on CDFIs, it's like a theme today, but to date, over $62 million have been channeled to credit unions that are CDFI certified in Puerto Rico in just a matter of 18 months or so. I mean, so it's been a Herculean task, and just a show of, it's just proof of what the cooperative sector can do when we all come together to address some of these issues together.
Absolutely. No, that is, I think, such an excellent point. I feel like we need a whole nother session on some of the cooperation in Puerto Rico, and they're really terrific examples. Dania, you touched on it a little bit earlier, mentioning that in part because one of the activities under Section 1006 is establishing an equity commission at USDA. But in general, I think this administration has made very clear that equity is very much a central pillar of what they see in their Build Back Better agenda. So I guess maybe Juan, I'll start with you here. How is equity, how are you seeing that play out in your work, and where do you see the most opportunity?
Equity, I think it's a huge opportunity for cooperatives. I think one of the things that I'm really hoping we all go back to, from this conference and start really looking at is how can we attract, develop, invest in minorities and younger people, because in order for us to be relevant as a cooperative movement into the future, We need to, lower the average age of cooperators, of our employees, of our members. We need to attract new talent. And I think we have a huge opportunity. And once again, we have a story to tell. I mean, every time I hear when people dissect the different generations, the realities, millennials and Gen Z, Zoomers, really care about organizations that are mission-driven, and we are. And we now more than ever, we have a really compelling story to tell of how we have delivered for our communities. And one of the things that I'll mention, and it's part of the the Build Back Better Act, is broadband. I know you mentioned that earlier, and I see that as a truly an issue that once again disproportionately affects communities of color and rural communities. And now that working remotely it's here to stay. I mean, it's a reality. I mean, we might have hybrid situations, but I think the opportunity is so huge for us to help revitalize rural communities and communities of color by providing broadband and increasing access to broadband. So that's one of the things that I am personally, and I know that credit unions are super excited about, because when it comes to, if you think about it, without broadband, oftentimes you can't have reliable financial services either that are fair. So you go to a lot of these communities and you have a lot of predatory lenders and things like that. And for us to do a better job of providing financial coaching and the tools needed to have upward mobility, you need to have broadband.
Absolutely. No, I think that, and in addition to kind of the economic aspect of the use of broadband, I think it was very clear for the parents of this pandemic how important it was on education, not having reliable broadband and your child misses lessons and classes, and it adds up, and will have damages down the road that I think investing in broadband will be critical for, and again, we'll very likely incorporate our friends with the Rural Electric Cooperative. So, Dania, can you talk a little bit about equity here?
Yeah, of course, and part of what brought me back to this work was what happened last summer. And, I think that for me, a person who's always been talking about anti-Black racism and anti-Black violence by the state, I think it was a real galvanizing moment for this next generation. And, maybe I'm a part of it because I came back to this very important work because I was just faced yet again in this very traumatic way with the pandemic of COVID, the pandemic of state violence against Black bodies, and the pandemic of, if you look at basically every health and wealth metric, African Americans fare poorer compared to their non-African American counterparts, right? And this has become so normalized that I think it's so ubiquitous we don't even see it anymore. And then we were all at home and we were forced to see it. And so this work, I think, at this moment in time is so inspiring because we saw communities physically coming together even when it wasn't physically safe to do so, because we want to see a different future. We don't want to wait for the next 60, 70 years for this promise to be fulfilled. And I've seen a lot more of my friends who were like, why are you working with Black farmers? Why is that your work? You could be doing this or that. Even my family, why are you doing nonprofit work? Why are you attracted to cooperative work? That's not what pays lawyers the big bucks, right? But I think that getting in touch with your passion is something that has become acceptable to talk about. And this generation, I've seen a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as just buying Black, or folks wanting to support Black businesses, that I don't think I've ever seen before. And I lived through Rodney King. And you would think that these moments would just kind of galvanize the same reaction, but something very special happened. We were given a gift in COVID. And I hope we don't lose the lesson with the burden of having to wear the mask and getting the shots and all these other things that go along with navigating the health pandemic. And the reality is that because we've allowed racism to proliferate within our economy, it has resulted in the environment having this whammy on all of us. So, when you think about why the Federation had to be founded, they had no choice but to come together because they had no other way to support their families. And here we are, 2021, in that moment where we have no choice. Our humanity is on the line. And I think that the point of equity being on everyone's agenda is so that we can have a future where cooperatives are the way that we function. Because I think we cannot function without cooperatives. I mean, I don't know if I'm being overly dramatic, but I really think that without democracy, codependence, cooperation, equity, working with each other, in the ways that all of our cooperative allies have supported the Federation, quite frankly, during the pandemic, it's been very inspiring. And I've definitely had young people very much more interested in the type of law that I practice and the type of work that I do now than ever before. And I think that's a huge opportunity, and I want to see it playing out in all of our spaces. And I really think that we can use cooperatives as like a rallying cry for all of our communities to come together and say, this capitalist regime we were living under before was anti-human, and here's something that can allow us to thrive even in the worst case scenario. And I think people are really, really going to come home to the cooperative model.
I know this is your first Co-op Impact Conference, but I think with that message, you are in the exact right place. So I just want to put that out
We
there.
can end right here.
Yeah, that's it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. I do, though, want to add on to that to say that one of the, in this Build Back Better agenda, there is, and we're terrifically excited about, $500 million. Again, I can't believe I'm saying billions. That would establish a co-op lending pilot program at the Small Business Administration. If you have been in co-op world for almost any amount of time, you know this issue at the Small Business Administration, in which co-ops are technically eligible, but they maintain regulations that basically bars them. And I think this lending program is another example in which folks who are newly drawn, new entrepreneurs, or folks who have been in business for a long time are saying, okay, the way we've been doing things is not a way I want to be doing things. And using the co-op model in worker co-ops, right, in food co-ops, and helping so that it doesn't take a food co-op 5, 6, 7 more years to start up, and instead can have the same access to capital as any other type of business. And I do think it's another example, and to the credit of this administration, in understanding who uses co-ops and why people use co-ops to bring equity, to bring advantage and level the playing field. And so I think this pilot program is just another example of hopefully being able to move that needle a little bit and giving, again, more people the opportunity of ownership. So connecting some dots, perhaps, this year's theme is embracing our cooperative identity in all that has happened, all of the legislation, as well as all of just the grassroots movement. Where do you see the most potential? What excites you the most in the P6 category? Juan?
So, you can't help to turn on the news and feel like people can't talk to each other anymore. That people can't come together, people can't agree, like we're on the brink of, another civil war, it almost feels like. But I think cooperatives are something that truly brings people together. I mean, in the way that I see it, it's like it's a third way. I mean, some people want government to be bigger and to take more things on. Some people are okay with corporations becoming huge and for a few people owning a ton. But cooperatives are about people owning things. And I really think this is our moment. This is our moment to tell our story, to tell who we are, to tell the stories of what we all have done over the past 2+ years. Obviously, a lot of it is things that we've always done, but at a time of crisis, people really rely on their cooperatives. And it's incumbent upon us to truly go back to our roots and communicate that to our members. The reality is that poor, rural, and communities of color need cooperatives now more than ever, and probably more than other populations. So it's, in my opinion, it's not just an opportunity, but it's a duty for us to educate, to tell people how cooperatives can not just improve your life, but they can change your life.
Yeah, and from a policy perspective, to your point, there's something for everyone in co-ops, which, you know, the senators who were here this morning don't always agree on a lot of issues, but they can agree on co-ops because it lets the people in their communities use this model to solve the challenges that they're facing. Personally, I think that's my favorite part of my job. I, you know, can go into this and find what works for them and be able to highlight that opportunity. Dania, what in the Principle 6 category excites you?
Well, I started to think of the answer, so let me,
Okay.
you asked a slightly different one, so let me just answer the one you asked before. But so what makes me really hopeful when I think about this moment that we're creating together is kind of rooted in our Community Regional Forestry Initiative. And what makes me hopeful about that is that we're helping small timber owners or timberland owners. A lot of air property owners have unmanaged forests, for example. A lot of rural landowners have timber. And there are all these opportunities that are coming available in thinking about the environment and climate change. And our Community Regional Forestry Initiative is having communities think collectively about our forests, our forest management, and our environment. And I think putting those pieces together, I think that environmental justice has kind of been pushing this needle for a really long time. And I think that the principles of the cooperative really kind of give it a place to land. And it's a structure that people can democratically participate in that's equitable, and it creates a promise for future generations to come. That's something really tangible. Our certified forester, Freddie Davis, I heard him say vertical value. We want to think about the vertical value, not the you know, the cut timber value, but the vertical value. And I think that kind of, for me, is the image that I think about is what we're creating together through our principles is we're creating vertical value for the next generation. And I know that we're going to do it, not just because we don't have a choice, but because we're making that choice in the work that we do every day.
I like vertical value. I like that a lot.
Right?
But similarly in the timber space, you know, there was another session which is available to registrants online through the month of October that worked. It was a case study on a conversion of a timber company that was in a family for I think a century, and the next generation was kind of interested in pursuing other efforts. And converted to a worker cooperative, right? And again, really rooting it in, pun intended, in its community. And similarly, I think there's an example in Wisconsin. I swear, there's a co-op solution for everything there. But really, they're looking at a multi-stakeholder cooperative where the workers are owners, the producers are owners, and the communities are is an owner. That it does not get more holistic than that, right? And that's, I think, again, the value of the cooperative model. You can shape it in a way that kind of really works for you.
And you know, the other thing is, let's also keep in mind that we are stronger together than the sum of our parts.
Absolutely.
I don't think any of our sectors alone can necessarily fix income inequality, home affordability, gender inequality down the line. But if we all think outside the box, innovate, and come together and collaborate, we can really deliver change.
Yeah.
Oh, I entirely agree. And I think on that note, I'm going to pause for questions from the audience, in which John Torres, our fearless leader, has a microphone in hand. And I think Tamla, oh, there's a question from Terrence over here.
I have to apologize for my impatience. I just love this panel. It was good. A lot to chew on, juicy stuff here. And I just want to start from a point that Dania brought up earlier, which I wholeheartedly agree with, that we're living through a very special historic moment. That convergence of pandemic and social movement opened up a new discourse globally, I would say, where the word equity is sprinkled all over our salads everywhere. And I think that's a positive thing. But, I'm also a sci-fi fan, and I feel like this moment is a wormhole. And there's a chance it may close up. And so my question is, in what ways can we think about keeping this wormhole open or expanding it, leveraging it to really not only do what it's done thus far, which by some economist standards has actually helped ease poverty, right? All the resources that have come out, not just because there's a pandemic, but because of the social movements that have focused on the crisis that people face at the grassroots. Can y'all talk about some of the ideas you have for kind of expanding this in a way to make it more systemic? For example, in the South, we need enabling legislation for cooperative development. So do you see a way to leverage this moment towards something like that?
I did not plant that question. But the Federation, we're operating under a charter that's not even in the state that we function in. And that's a huge challenge that we face in the South, is that enabling legislation for cooperatives to even be formed is limited. And when we try to mount campaigns to make it happen, we just don't have enough juice, or we haven't historically had enough juice. And so I think we've gotten some really great relationships going over the past, through the history of our work, but definitely since I've been on board, I feel that there have been a lot of great partnerships with allies that, we wouldn't have been on their radar previously. And it's given us opportunities to be in spaces and rooms where we can lift up these issues, because there's a lot of commonality in what we're all going through together. So I think that one of the things that we have to do, and that I feel a lot of pressure in my particular role, is I was invited to give a presentation in front of the Florida Senate Ag Committee. And all these years I've been living in Florida, I'd never been invited before, but now the moment is here that I'm with the Federation. And I think because I'm with a cooperative association, even though that's still, I feel like in the South it still feels like a mystical thing for people. And I think keeping that dialogue going and really, using those relationships, the human connections, the fact that when we're on Zoom, sometimes people's hair was a mess and they had on no makeup and they had on jammies. Like we all have kind of seen each other's vulnerabilities. And I think that there have been forces trying to push us to put the makeup back on. But I like what I'm seeing in the forces that are encouraging us to not do that. I think that I'm seeing a lot of, just even on the plane, I'll strike up a conversation with someone, we'll exchange a card, and we can think of ways that our work intersects now that we weren't really thinking about in the past. And so making those intersections tangible through relationship and rapport, I think, is how we keep this moment without getting burnt out.
I think we need to truly seize this moment and not let it become a buzzword, not let it just become a trend, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's the fair thing to do. But it also makes business sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think us as cooperatives, as a sector, if you think about it, we haven't really grown tremendously over the last, 20, 30 years. I know credit unions certainly haven't. I mean, they have about 7-8% of all the assets of all banking, and that's kind of where they are. And I think it's because we need to do a better job of understanding the needs and the communities that are currently not being served. And what I will tell you, so if you go to a Latino community, Hispanic community in New Mexico, for example, you might not see Bank of America, but you're going to see payday lenders. You may not see good quality food, but you're going to see McDonald's. So obviously, for-profit corporations and predatory institutions have seen the benefits of going there and exploiting our communities. So us as cooperators have an opportunity that's not just the right thing to do, but it actually truly would be something that would help us stay relevant and grow the way that I think we need to. To your point about the Southern cooperatives, I think that's just a great example of somewhere where I think cooperatives should be coming together and working together to change those laws. Because let's be real. I think credit unions would probably be taxed, and other cooperative sectors would be taxed if we didn't stand together under the banner of cooperatives and supported each other, thanks to the work that NCBA CLUSA does. So I think that's another great opportunity for us to look at it and see how we could advocate for each other, especially when it's going to help communities, underserved communities and communities of color.
I think we need to build systems, right? Like these infusions of cash are not going to keep happening. That really, let's build, to your point, that infrastructure so that it is sustainable for us to use going forward. The other point that I would like to add, again, because it is my job, is I cannot overstate how important it is to advocate. I think cooperators are wildly humble people.
It's true.
Which is wonderful to work with.
True.
But you need to tell the story. I mean, these stories are amazing. And elected officials won't know them unless you tell them about it, unless you invite your elected official to your co-op. So I think that is the way you show that the Rural Cooperative Development Grant is a relatively small amount, but we make so much use out of it that imagine if you expanded it. So I just wanted to use the opportunity to plug to people, build a relationship with your elected officials. And it does not have to be transactional. Tina Smith mentioned she is a member of her food co-op. That's terrific. She understands that difference. And I think really building out those relationships is what's going to be important to sustain this kind of growth.
Dispatches from the virtual community. I will say, from monitoring these conversations today, the amen chorus to this session has been particularly strong. We have seen, before I get there, Terrence, you awakened my nerd gene. So like while the wormhole is open, let's not stay in the analog or the binary. Like let's just expand to the multiverse, because the multiverse is like where there's abundance and not living in the scarcity.
Nerds.
So thank you for...
We've exceeded my understanding here. I gotta be
nerds. Nerds are everywhere. All right, so... in terms of one of the last comments that were made about even though we are humble, we need to amplify our message and put it out there. LaDonna Redmond says, yes, we are missing an opportunity to reach other communities. And then Salandy Brown, who I think during this conference is campaigning to be on the NCBA CLUSA board, we should look at that next spring, saying connectivity is no longer a want, it is a necessity. Many electric co-ops have been committed to being a part of the solution by deploying broadband networks in order to meet evolving member needs. Leela Roberts responded to that, says, as a SBDC director with the Fast Growing Cooperative and Technical Assistance Program, they're very interested in this development at the SBA. So look, connections happening in chat in this session. Margaret Bow says, yes, there are several southern states that need modern co-op statutes. Also, Margaret Bow said, thank you to Kate for the shout out to the pulp and paper mills co-ops who are organizing here in the Wisconsin Rapids and Park Falls.
Margaret and the UW at USDA and the UW Center for Cooperatives are awesome and are doing amazing work, and they are engaging with their members of Congress to help get it done.
We all need to leave here today and go to Wisconsin
I
and New
think
Mexico.
so. I think so.
I think we should have made it part of the game on the app. Like how many times you're going to name drop Wisconsin. That was a missed opportunity. We're going to be on it next year.
The other thing, actually, with the mention of the electric co-ops, I wanted to add a really exciting program that NCBA CLUSA gets to work with is the rural. Not in Wisconsin. There's one. Don't you worry. Is the Rural Energy Savings Program, and I just wanted to know it essentially allows the electric co-op to work as the intermediary and make energy efficiency improvements on homes at no or very little upfront cost to the resident. Again, reducing that barrier to participation. And what's really exciting in the Build Back Better Act is there is an influx of these funds that would be allowed to use towards grants, one, to help cover the cost of administration for the electric co-ops, but also to help bring the most in-need homes up to code of health and safety. So folks who wouldn't otherwise be eligible to participate because their home is unsafe, they are able to use grants to help improve that. And I think it's such a catalyst in the community because a lot of these partnerships are either building up these high-skilled jobs within the co-op or are partnering with local small businesses. So I just wanted to make a note of that because I think, you know, we talked about climate change a little bit and really making sure that we're doing everything we can so that we aren't continuing these, where the disparities are worse and the effects are worse in communities because they are poor. So I think that's a really special program, and so just wanted to use my liberties as moderator to amplify that, but I'll go to John now.
Yeah, thank you. Jose Luis Rojas from LEAF. We're a CDFI nonprofit. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that a lot of CDFIs that work with co-ops have received a lot of money, but also a lot of CDFIs that don't work with co-ops, but are interested in working with co-ops, also received a lot of money. So can you talk about how, just ways that you think that those two CDFIs can work together to increase lending to co-ops?
Mm-hmm. You're CDFI champion here. I can let you start, or I can just give my hopes and dreams for. I think as much as working within the co-op community is very, very important, the reality is there are these other institutions that exist. And I think we need to help more people understand the cooperative difference. And whether that's a technical aspect of how do you make a loan to a co-op when there's 10,000 owners of this food co-op without requiring a personal guarantee, or what does that look like? I think getting a little bit outside of the co-op silos and making sure, you know, whether that's the small business development centers or other CDFIs, I think making sure we do some of this education campaigning and helping, again, tell our stories. And I think once people hear the stories, they have at least some level of buy-in that they're willing to learn how to do it and how to carry out these activities technically. CDFI, do you have anything to add there?
I just, you know, I think we need to think outside the box. I mean, I think the work that like Mike Mercer is doing in the Southeast with NCBA CLUSA is so important. I think we need leaders in the cooperative movement that will connect the dots. Because take, for instance, climate change. I mean, imagine if rural electric co-ops worked with credit unions, with co-ops of contractors that helped retrofit homes. I mean, we could all, once again, right there, three different sectors, but we can have more. We can add more to that list. I mean, we could have some profound change. And I think now that there are various government programs that are infusing some dollars, I think it's going to take some creativity from us as leaders in the cooperative sector. So I think each one of us can think of ways that we could all collaborate with other cooperative sectors. And if you do know CDFIs in your area, think of ways that you could collaborate and approach them with them. Because once again, I think we all, you know, we're so, I think, focused on the operations, the day-to-day operations, that sometimes we don't have time or the ability to dream big. But once again, you know, I think we have a huge opportunity to dream big and do some really great things as we come together to collaborate.
And for those who have those great ideas, always feel free to share them with NCBA CLUSA. We love good ideas and helping to work together to carry them out, right? It's all about using our own networks and how we can leverage those. John, I see over here, or?
I'm gonna try and keep my mask on if I can, but So my name is Sky Gia Garcia. First, I am an abolitionist and someone who practices anti-oppressive politics. Second, I'm the president of a Wisconsin-based nonprofit called Madison Community Cooperative. We have 11 different properties that we manage, and we actually own 8 of them. We, as housing providers, have responsibility to undo the harm that was caused by the US housing system to the Black population. And our most recent challenge has been the complete renovation of a house that will have a mission to serve Black and Brown LGBTQIA members, amongst others, to create a diverse community. People of all different types of faith, all different types of race, all different types of gender identities. Now, my question is related to funding, actually. I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to obtain the funding. We have an HVAC system that's all electric that's going in. We have a portion of it already secured. However, we have been avoiding using this city because, to be quite frank, some of their loan offers have been a bit predatory. And we acknowledge that debt is a tool of oppression. So I'm curious if you guys have anything to say about this.
I would start just to say Madison has an incredibly, just a wonderful cooperative community. There are great people there that I'm happy to help put you in touch with. I think you should speak with them. They'll have some really great local solutions. I was a member of the UW Credit Union, so I think that speaking with them, understanding how they can help you reach your goals is something they are incredibly interested in doing. But then I think I would turn it to Juan to see kind of your thoughts on, from the finance world, how you might advise.
Well, I think you're right on point. I think this is another great example of how I think if we all come together, we can tackle some of those things. I know that there's an amazing cooperative movement there and credit union movement. We call it Credit Union Mecca.
Yeah.
Because, the Credit Union National Association is headquartered there, and so is CUNA Mutual Group, and the World Council of Credit Unions is there. So I would love to,
So there's reason for my obsession with Wisconsin is what you're saying, right? Okay.
That's right. So I think we should, through, and maybe even through NCBA CLUSA, bring together a group to kind of look at how we could do that.
I don't really have a finance background, but I just find I was like, let's talk after, because that sounds very interesting to me. We have a very diverse set of cooperatives under the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. So in terms of financing, I don't have a particular script, so I'd have to talk through with you what the particular needs are. But I definitely appreciate your point about debt kind of driving some of the colonialist issues that we're grappling with to this day. It's definitely a conundrum, but I can acknowledge that.
Yeah, find us afterwards, because there's definitely some great folks who, from between the nonprofits and other cooperative sectors, I think would be great to be in touch with.
Yeah, and I'd love to see if there are some grant dollars that that could be leveraged for your cause too. So.
Last question.
A lot of pressure, I guess, for the last question. Hi, I'm Oscar Abella from the Next City. In terms of policy, when it comes to growing credit unions, for instance, the real constraint isn't deposits, right? It's always net worth, it's always equity, unretained earnings, wherever that piece comes from. And there's a way to do it, right? You have secondary capital. And I'm just really curious, because there's $210 million or something in secondary capital in the whole entire credit union system, but almost all of it is with 2 credit unions, right? Self-Help and Hope Credit Union. Is that a policy issue? Is it the problem, the secondary capital policy that needs to be changed, or is it a capacity and awareness issue that this is a thing that co-ops could do for each other? Other co-ops RAI could provide secondary capital to more credit unions across the country. Is that the problem, or is it the actual terms of the program and the way it works?
I've got to defer entirely to you on this.
Of course, we're going to end on the hard question. So I'll give you my personal opinion. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations over the last couple of years about this whole concept of how hard it is to start a new credit union. One of the credit union pioneers, Louise Herring, over there in the Midwest, she was a single mother, and she got in her car with her 2 kids, and she helped found over 500 credit unions all over the Midwest back in the early days of credit unions. And now you're lucky if we have 1 or 2 credit unions a year that are founded. And I think you've identified some of the issues. I personally think the National Credit Union Administration makes it much tougher than it should be. All that said, there's been, I believe, 2 board members from the NCUA who have publicly recently stated that they really want to tackle this, that they want to break down barriers for the creation of new credit unions. So I think that's personally really exciting. I know that there's this groundswell of support, grassroots support for this project, and now I'm going to be really looking forward to NCUA actually putting those words into action. Because it is a lot more difficult than it should be. I mean, CUNA used to have, the Credit Union National Association used to have people that worked creating credit unions, and once again, now it's become so difficult to do so. So I really look forward to seeing how this is addressed, and it's certainly a topic that's coming up more and more, but not just in the grassroots, but like I said, NCUA is actually now beginning to have some public comments about it.
And I think very directly connects to, and thank you for bringing this to a nice close, the importance of advocacy, right? NCUA doesn't just do that unless there's pressure from the stakeholders saying this is an issue. So in that, I think maybe if you can just give some final thoughts, what you want to leave folks with on advocacy and why it's important, and generally what you want folks to walk away from with this.
I'll start because I want to give you the last word. But I am just really excited by this panel. I'm excited by the work that cooperatives have done during these crises, and it just goes to show that there's really strength when we all come together. And I think we're just beginning our work. I think it's exciting to think of the change that we can deliver our communities that have historically been oppressed and have not had access to equity. And our third way, where people own the equity and own the means of production, I think is the future. And I am excited for the work that we're going to keep going and keep doing, because once again, we are so much stronger than each individual sector.
Now I feel like you put all this pressure on me. That was fantastic. Well, this has been such a treat. I thank you all for being here. I thank you for inviting me to participate. I am very excited. I don't know like how to contain it. I feel like this galvanizing moment that we've captured is not going to be lost, because I think that we've lived through something together that we cannot forget. And so each time we would kind of settle back into the way things were before, I think we'll remember that we don't want to have to wear masks and stay in our houses for 6 to 9 months, depending on what state you're in. But I definitely think that, like I was saying, like I hope that the message that we've learned together isn't going to be lost. And one of those messages is that there were people who, during COVID, left their homes around the world to march, to commemorate something that our government did to one of our citizens. And the fact that there was international coming together. That every time I see one of those videos, I can't help but get very, very emotional because I just believe in the power of people. And I really believe that we've all kind of felt what it feels like to tap into that singular human experience. And so I think that because we live in a society and there has to be some financial transactions, there's always a threat and the risk of exploitation. There's always a threat and the risk of folks who being not having the ability to access the greatest opportunities. I think that cooperatives really, from their origin, confront that very directly. And the principles of cooperatives should be the guiding principles, quite frankly, of our government, because democratically made decisions, ownership of the people, making controlling decisions, regardless of whether you're the CEO or you're a worker, that camaraderie that cooperatives can create is really the third way. And I think that we should leave this session, but this entire conference, really, really revitalized and excited about going and spreading this message wherever we can and whenever we can, because I don't think that it comes up organically all the time, but if you think about it, like we were able to find all of these examples. You all have shared examples, even in sharing the questions, of ways for us all to continue to keep these connections going. And so that's kind of how I would like to see us leaving, that this session is just, we're just putting a comma, but we're going forward to the work that we're going to continue to build and grow together.
You've done my job. I have no comments to add to that. You have been truly fantastic. I feel inspired after months and months of arduous policy. I feel so good about how it's being used and how the path forward. You are both a treat to talk with, and I really appreciate it. So I think turn it over to John Torres or Doug O'Brien, actually, to take us to the next step.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Kate and Danny and Juan, what a fantastic conversation. And this idea that we are in a special moment, a special era for the ways so well articulated by our panel, and also articulated that we need to build the systems to capture the energy, the learnings of today, to make sure that we have sustained work toward equity, towards sustainability, towards democracy. The only way that's going to happen, and here we are at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., is if we change our laws, if we change the policy. And the only way that policy changes for the benefit of cooperatives and the cooperative community is if we work together in the ways that our panel just talked about. So I really appreciate the conversation and the energy that these folks brought to us today. And I'm also really excited about our next panel, which will be in about 35 minutes or so we're about to go on break. But at 3:30, we'll come back together here in the ballroom for what is my highlight in the cooperative year, and that's a conversation with the inductees of the Hall of Fame. So if we'll have an opportunity to learn from their experience, to be inspired, and to share their vision. So please join us back here at 3:30 Eastern. Folks, virtually, we look forward to seeing you back here as well. And great session this afternoon. Thanks, everybody.